Good evening, my dear things. I hope you all have been incredibly well and having a great week thus far. After reading comments from a few of you regarding James Jameson since posting the video about him, I've been conducting a lot of research regarding who the individual was besides the cannibal stuff. I appreciate your comments, and I do apologize sincerely for not cross-checking my references. Unfortunately, when I did research him, all I could find was stuff about the cannibalism aspect and not enough about really anything else, and there was a lot of conflicting information. That is my fault for not looking more extensively into it. I'm hopefully rectifying that tonight. If there are any discrepancies in this, let me know in the comments below, no matter how harsh they are. I do appreciate it because honestly, if you're gonna present stuff, information, you should make sure that it's factual, and I should have did that. That's on me. Okay, so James Sligo Jameson was a Scottish naturalist and traveler in Africa, although he did travel to other countries as well. He was the grandson of the founder of Jameson Irish Whiskey. So I did actually get that part wrong in my original video. So here we are. In 1877, James decided to devote himself to travel. In that same year, he traveled to Ceylon, I think that's how you pronounce it, Singapore, and later to Borneo, where he was the first to describe the black honey buzzard and returned home with a collection of birds, butterflies, and beetles. He was, I believe, in his early 20s at this point as well. Near the end of 1878, James went to South Africa in search of big game and hunted for a few weeks on the outskirts of the Kalahari Desert. In 1881, James returned to England with a collection of animal heads as well as ornithological, etymological, and botanical specimens, which are birds, bugs, and plant specimens, for those of you who aren't sure what any of those terms meant. In 1882, James, while accompanied by his brother, went on a shooting expedition to the Rocky Mountains, passing from the main range of Montana to the North Fork of the Shoshone River. He also visited Spain and Algeria in 1884. On his way home in February 1885, he married Ethel, the daughter of Henry Marion Durand. They had 2 daughters. On January 20th, 1887, James joined as a naturalist and joined the Emin Pasha Relief Expedition under the direction of Henry Morton Stanley, after agreeing to contribute £1,000 to the funds. Stanley had some concerns about Jameson, feeling him to be physically frail by his, demeanor, but was reassured by his earlier travel experiences. By March, the expedition reached Banana and started traveling up the Congo River from there. Stanley developed dysentery and blamed James since he was responsible for cooking and rations, so I guess that seems logical, which caused some tension between the two of them, unsurprisingly. Jameson stated that Stanley was a harsh and hard-to-satisfy leader. As they got deeper into the Congo Basin, the expedition's physician, Thomas Hazel Park, began to notice James's fascination with the subject of cannibalism. In June 1887, Jameson was left as a second in command of the rear column under Major Edmund Musgrave Bartlow at Yambuya on the Aruwimi River, while Stanley's party pushed further into the interior in search of Emin. Emin Pasha was an Ottoman physician and governor of Equatoria in southern Sudan, who was threatened by Mahdist rebels and isolation. Well, he was isolated at that time, so they were going in to rescue him. Stanley, with the New York Herald newspaper, organized the expedition to rescue Emin Pasha. The rear guard was left behind because Stanley had brought too much equipment for the carriers he had. Which brings us to Tippu Tib, who was a powerful Zanzibar slave and ivory trader. He promised Stanley additional carriers, which he sent to Yambuya. The now reinforced expedition allowed James and his companions to follow Stanley with the additional stores, which would reach them from the mouth of the Congo. Unfortunately, Tippu Tib failed to keep his promise, which caused James to visit him in August at Stanley Falls. Today they are Boyoma Falls on the Upper Congo. And unfortunately, that meeting didn't go anywhere. News from Stanley never reached the camp, and sickness soon carried off a third of the occupants. James mentioned in his diary how horrible it was to watch them slowly dying before his eyes and unable to do anything for them. The relationships with the surrounding villages was awful as well, since the natives refused to sell them food, most likely due to the connection with Tippu Tib's slavers, who repeatedly made raids in the area. James and his companions reacted by kidnapping women and children from the villages in the area, only returning them in exchange for a ransom in the form of provisions. Even so, their supplies often grew scarce. There were no plantations and very little meat left on top of the natives still refusing to trade, which left James even more desperate. In one of his diary entries, James concluded that as a last resort, they must catch more of their women. As sick as that is. I will give you a little bit of a trigger warning. There are some pretty twisted and dark facts coming, so if you don't really want to hear about it, you may want to skip. Just letting you know. So, as the official naturalist of the expedition, Jameson collected many birds and insects, which he described in detail within his diary. And, unfortunately, it wasn't just animals that he started bringing back. So, after Tippu Tib's slavers attacked a nearby village, one of their commanders presented Jameson the head of a killed villager. James Jameson salted the head to preserve it and sent it to London to be dressed and mounted by a taxidermist. His colleague William Boney, not sure how you pronounce that, later saw it on display in James's home. So there's verifiable fact that he actually did do that. In February 1888, James started on a strenuous journey to pay another visit to Tippu Tib, where he found him at Kasongo, roughly 300 miles higher up the Congo River than Stanley Falls. While returning with Tippu to Yambuya in May, a horrendous event occurred which later became known as the Jameson Affair. While watching some natives dance at the house of the chief of Riba, a riverside village, Tippu Tib explained to James that the festivities usually concluded with a banquet of human flesh, and went on to tell him of several episodes of cannibalism that Tippu had personally witnessed. James commented, according to his published diary, that people back home believe such stories to be only travelers' tales, basically lies, or tall tales. James added that one of Tippu Tib's associates replied, stating, "Give me a bit of cloth and see." In the diary, James wrote, I quote, "I sent my boy for 6 handkerchiefs, thinking it was all a joke, but presently a man appeared leading a young girl of about 10 years old by the hand. Then I witnessed the most horribly sickening sight I am ever likely to see in my life. He plunged the knife quickly into her breast twice, and she fell on her face, turning over on her side. 3 men ran forward and began to cut up the body of the girl. Finally, her head was cut off, and not a particle remained, each man taking his piece away down to the river to wash it. The most extraordinary thing was that the girl never uttered a sound, nor struggled, until she fell. Until the last moment, I could not believe that they were in earnest, that it was anything save a ruse to get money out of me. When I went home, I tried to make some small sketches of the scene while still fresh in my memory. Not that it is ever likely to fade from it. No one here seemed to be in the least astonished by it." End quotes. According to James, the girl had been captured and enslaved in a raid not far from the Riba village, probably not long before he saw her die. After James Jameson's death and the conclusion of the expedition, at the time when Stanley's published account of his relations with the rear column at Yambuya was undergoing severe criticism at the hands of the survivors, Stanley published the story in the London Times on November 8th, 1990. He claimed that James Jameson had deliberately bought the girl and donated her to cannibals in order to watch and draw her transformation into food. Stanley's most incriminating witness was Asad Farhan, James Jameson's interpreter, who, however, turned out to be also highly unreliable. According to a sworn statement made by Farhan in Stanley's presence, Jameson had expressed curiosity to witness cannibalism, and Tippu Tib had suggested that James purchase and sacrifice a slave for the purpose. Jameson had asked about the price and was told he could purchase a slave for 6 handkerchiefs. He sent for the handkerchiefs and gave them to a man who soon returned bringing the 10-year-old girl. Together with the chief and other people present, they went to a group of huts, and a man pointed out the girl, stating she was a present for the white man. He wants to see how you do with her when you eat her. The girl was tied by a hand to a tree, while about 5 natives were sharpening their knives. One of them killed her by stabbing her twice in the belly. Similar to Jameson's account, the girl did not scream, but knew what was going on, and was most likely going to die. She was looking right and left as if looking for help. When she was stabbed, she fell down dead. The natives then cut her into pieces and distributed them among themselves. Some of them did go down to the river to wash the meat, while others went straight to their huts to cook it. While this happened, Mr. Jameson had his book and pencil in hand and was making rough sketches of the scene. Afterwards, he went to his house to finish them and paint them with watercolors. Farhan said that he and many others had seen the sketches. Farhan's testimony was doubtful because he changed his story twice. In September 1888, 2 members of the committee organizing the expedition questioned Farhan, and he revoked his statement, saying he had merely made the statements because of his bad feelings for Jameson. He claimed Jameson happened upon the scene when the girl was already dead, and had merely watched and made sketches while the cannibals were carving parts of her body and getting them ready for cooking. He added that such sights were common in the region, and he had repeatedly seen similar proceedings himself. The versions of the events conflicted with James Jameson's own admission that he saw the murder, and Farhan was unable to convincingly explain why his statement in front of the committee members differed from what he had stated earlier and later, and it wasn't a little different, it was massively different. Another account was published by Stanley, which came from William Bonney, one of Jameson's companions at Yambuya. Bonnie was not present at Reba Reba, so he couldn't know exactly what had occurred there, but he had seen the sketches. According to him, Jameson stayed around till the end, watching while the girl's remains were consumed. He confirmed that Jameson had paid 6 cotton handkerchiefs for the girl, and added that regarding the Jameson story, there can be no doubt about the absolute correctness of Mr. Stanley's statement. Mr. Jameson himself related to me every incident as described by Mr. Stanley. End quotes. Well, Stanley himself published the charges against Jameson and similarly severe charges against Barlow. His attempt at saving his reputation by placing the blame for the disastrous course of the Emin Pasha relief expedition on others backfired. Both Stanley's and the expedition's reputations were permanently damaged by the resulting discussion of the behavior of the rear guard's members, and the bad publicity most likely contributed to the fact that privately organized non-scientific expeditions into Africa ceased after that. Robert B. Edgerton explained the incident in the context of the Congo at that time, observing that while the direct involvement of James Jameson, a gentlemanly European, was unusual, the slave girl's fate was not, since cannibalism was undoubtedly widespread and many people were murdered expressly so that others might feast upon their bodies. Eyewitness accounts describe the purchase, butchering, and consumption of slaves as a daily life activity, free from strong emotions seen by those who practiced it, as not essentially different from the eating of goats or other animals. Human flesh was described as particularly tasty, especially when it came from children, and there were some more cases on record where healthy children were stabbed to death to provide a feast for their owners, which is heartbreaking and horrible. Other slave children had their throats cut or were beheaded for the same purpose, sometimes after a period of deliberate fattening. Unfortunately, James Jameson died from sickness while in the Congo before he was ever able to defend himself for the crimes associated with the cannibalism aspect. While cannibalism is controversial, many tribes and people have undertaken the custom. It's hard to say whether it's acceptable or not. I will say I find it horrible that it was mostly slaves who didn't have a say in the matter or a choice. And the fact that it was children is even more horrendous, to put it nicely. And I'm actually surprised, and I probably shouldn't be, that slavery happened among villages, not just among outside sources. Like the Dutch, we know, I believe, were one group that started slavery, but not, although slavery has always been around, I guess, since the dawn of man. But it's one that I'm kind of familiar with. So it is kind of surprising to me that you would treat another group as slaves when they're the same as you. It's kind of odd. But what are your thoughts on cannibalism? I can see cannibalism being beneficial for times of struggle where food is scarce. However, I don't think it's acceptable to have, like, partake in cannibalism that isn't, I guess, consented to. I know who the hell would want to consent to that, but in some cultures, in, I believe, I want to say Nordic people, they supposedly, now I don't know if this is true, I will honestly do some research if you are curious, but I do remember reading that they would actually sacrifice 9 humans, I believe pig, other animals, every 9 years, I believe. And usually the 9 human victims were consenting participants. I don't know if that's true, though. Let me know if you are curious about that. What do you think of James Jameson? Do you believe his diary entries or those who recounted the event? There seems to be a lot of he said, she said around it, which makes it quite complicated to know what is fact and what was fabricated. Now, there are some consistencies, of course. You have the purchase of the slave girl. Obviously, she most likely was 10 years old because that is a commonality among the various witnesses, including Jameson. It was 6 handkerchiefs. They did murder her and ate her. It's just how they did it, and did he actually witness it or did he come in later? I don't know. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, and if I missed any key details regarding James Jameson or his companions as well, let me know. I will leave links and information on my sources, where I got everything from. If there's anything you'd like to know more about, whether it's unfortunately the horrible slave trade, kind of glad we're not there in America. Although I have heard that technically our prison system is being used like a like slave trade, because the prisoners are used by big corporations to do cheap labor. I think they're paid like 89 cents an hour, which is absolutely disgusting to me. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's true, but it is something that I've heard recently. I honestly don't know enough about our prison systems in America. I have heard that they're owned by big corporations, and basically they make a lot of money off of the prison system, which is also really disgusting to me. Uh, if you want to know more about, American history, the horrible parts, because I'm actually curious about the horrible parts, because we're not taught about it in school. I honestly wasn't taught anything really about Black history, Native American history, or anything really. They kind of just glanced over the civil rights movement, uh, and the Trail of Tears. I did read about that, and of course the Civil War, of course, but not really what the Civil War was really fighting about, besides slavery, which I found out wasn't actually the main point of the Civil War. So, if you have any interest or curiosity about any of that, I will dig into the horrors of American history if you have any interest. Let me know in the comments below, or if you would like me to talk about any strange case or historical event, let me know as well. If you'd like me to go back to doing that type of stuff. Next week, I will be playing Path of Exile again, or something. I don't know. I will probably just wing it and play whatever the heck I feel like it. I don't know. I may actually go back to classic games because I miss those. Anyways, I will be reviewing I Am Not a Serial Killer. That is available to stream on Shudder, AMC Plus, Canopy, and Philo. If you have a movie or game you'd like to recommend, let me know your suggestions in the comments, because I am always open to suggestions. Or if you're interested in anything, the Nordic beliefs back in the day, if that whole human sacrifice actually happened or not, I have no idea. I know human sacrifice was actually common in certain groups back in the day. I'm not sure which ones. So again, if you are interested in that, let me know. I will do a much better job cross-referencing my sources in the future. Again, I really, really apologize. Thank you so much for your feedback. Again, I greatly appreciate it, regardless how harsh it was or is. Sometimes it's necessary, to be honest. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a great weekend and take care until next time. Good night, everybody.